Okay, so explain my Google Site portfolio. So how have the instructional models of teaching used in my unit plan relate to my TEKS, my unit goals, and summative assessments? So the first TEK in my unit was identify the causes of World War I and reasons for U.S. entry. And so for this and this is just for the group part of it, I use Partners in Learning. Within the lesson, I did use explicit instruction in quite a few of these TEKS, just because in history they do get exposed to a lot of primary and secondary sources, and they need to be able to analyze these resources. And so at first I do a lot of modeling so that the students know what they're expected to know, how they're expected to analyze these sources. And so eventually they understand, they get it, and they're able to do this on their own. Now, for identify causes of World War I used the Jigsaw version of Partners in Learning, where each student had their own assignment. And so from there, they do what they're supposed to. They read their information, and then they discuss what they found out with the other students in the group. And so they're able to learn from each other. And the summative assessments, of course, was a selected response in which the students were identifying the causes of World War I and reasons for U.S. entry. They also did get some short response questions. For the second one, analyze the impact of the weapons. So also they were in Partners in Learning. However, this time it was in Jigsaw. They were working with each other to figure out how these weapons led to a stalemate. Why is it that these weapons extended the war for much longer than it was expected? And so they do have, again, some selected response and short answer questions. For the third TEKS, explain constitutional issues. So for this one, I used the group investigation model so that the students could investigate whether these issues went against the Constitution or were within the bounds of the Constitution. They also investigated whether the government has the power to limit these rights during certain crises. And also they had selected response and short answer questions. For the last one, they had to analyze major issues. So they had to analyze isolationism, neutrality, why was the U.S. so against going into war during that time period, what were the issues of isolation and neutrality after World War I. They had to analyze the 14 points and the Treaty of Versailles. And so for this, I had them use the concept attainment model. There are certain concepts within the 14 points in the Treaty of Versailles that I wanted them to be able to see because they do have some similarities. So they worked in a group, and they were able to see, or they're supposed to be able to see, what similarities these documents have, what differences they have, and so they're able to pinpoint a little bit easier on the major differences. For the summative assessment, I had them write a extended response, written response, and so they had to answer they had to compare and contrast the 14 points in the Treaty of Versailles and what was the reaction of the United States, of the Senate here towards the Treaty of Versailles, and how that led to isolationism and neutrality. So what new or unique methods of teaching will impact my teaching in the future? Well, like I said before, partners in learning or the cooperative groups is something that I had used, but I had never really realized how many different ways you could use it. And so within the book, it mentions so many different methods of using the groups to increase efficiency, and also how to use the model depending on what your goal is. Now, the diversity scenarios. There's times where I include like little questions with real life situations just to make those connections, but I had never thought of making them into projects, which is a really fun idea. And so my diversity projects or scenarios were with nationalism, which still continues to be an issue to this day. Weapons, that's another issue, but of course it's like in a different situation because it's more of a domestic issue now. Constitutional issues, they're very much so still an issue to this day. And then isolationism, I just compared it to people being isolated within the schools, how that affects other people. Philosophers. So I was already somewhat familiar with John Franklin Bobbitt and John Dewey from a previous course, but applying it into a unit lesson really helped me understand and appreciate them even more so. So those are things that I'm going to be thinking about when coming up with new lessons. And then what teaching methods or innovative assessment techniques will help you organize, administer, or discuss assessment results with students, parents, and or administrators in the future. So I found a lot of amazing forms in the CALS book. There's so many different things that I could use that will help. One of them that I really liked was the learning targets and blueprints. I think by writing down your learning targets, by having a blueprint so that you know what is going to be assessed, how you're going to make your assessment, really helps you. Not only that, it helps your students because the students know, okay, this is what I need to know. Also, these are the type of learning targets that I need. And it also helps administration and your team. Rubrics and or scoring guides is another thing that I also plan on utilizing more. And I think it's really important. That way the students know exactly what it is that they're being graded on, and they know how to do the work, how to do the assignment. And so I have started incorporating rubrics into my classes lately. Other things, I really liked these forms, the form for formative and summative assessment plans. So this is something that could be used really all the time. You write down the learning target, what type of assessment it was, what type of assignment, and you can just keep track of this, especially if it's like where you're doing like a Q&A and within the class, within the lecture, and you just have that, you're writing it down as you go, and it's easy to keep track of these things. The students tracking progress by learning target. And these again are forms that you could really use in any conferences that you have with parents, with administrators, with your department, and you could really help to see that student growth, if there is a lack of growth, if there's any issues, and it also helps the teacher determine, okay, maybe I'm doing something wrong. How can I get back on track? So these are forms that I will be utilizing within my lessons.